Fatima Sajun was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. She obtained an honors degree in political science, and since then she has worked in community development and is personally committed to diversity, inclusion, human rights, and civic engagement. Some of her contributions include establishing a charitable group called the Muslim Friends of Humber, inspiring other women to join non-profit boards, organizing interfaith dialogues through Mosaic, and she was one of the founding members of the Canadian Muslim Vote, and she currently works as a development officer for the only human rights and civil liberties organization for Canadian Muslims called the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Fatima's inspiring journey is rooted in her family life, where she learned the value of serving Allah through serving the community. As you'll hear from her story, the blessings in her life as well as the challenges she's faced is what she uses to inspire others, and this is her journey.
My inspiration comes from my parents, their upbringing, the challenges they faced, and how they applied the lessons of the Ahlulbayt in their lives. My dad was a baby when he lost his mom, and he grew up at his neighbor's home. He was the eldest brother of 15 siblings, and they went through really tough economic times. And ever since he was young, he always felt this desire, this need to help people. And when he was 6 years old, that's when he first started volunteering with the mosque in Kampala. And as he grew up, he continued volunteering through his youth, through his adult life. Even when he came to Canada, my father was one of the founding presidents of the Toronto Jamaat, and he served as president for 4 terms. He also established 2 charitable organizations. One was Nasimco in 1980 and the Ahlulbayt Assembly of Canada in 1993. My dad was also one of the founding members of the Jaffrey Housing Corporation, which is more commonly known as the Crescent Village or the Complex. And he was also a commissioner with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and he served on several nonprofit boards. My mother's story was a little bit different. She was the eldest sister of 5 siblings. She grew up in Jinja, and when she got older, she developed crippling arthritis. Her hands were like this, to the point where the community did not know what was happening to her. And when she got married and moved to Kampala, in those days, people who were not doing well would sit outside of the mosque. So she was among a few women who sat on a bench while the program was happening inside. And one day she picked up the broom however she could, and she started sweeping. And she prayed to God that if one day I get better, if I can use my hands again, I will dedicate my life to serving the community. And it just so happened that slowly her hands started to work again, and she stayed true to her promise. It's been more than 50 years, and she has dedicated all her life continuously to serving the community. So I grew up seeing this sense of devotion and purpose from my parents. And my sisters and I would sometimes ask our parents that, why do you do so much to the point where it's detrimental to your health? And they would turn back and smile at us and say, the Ahlulbayt did so much for the sake of Allah. What we are doing is just a drop in the bucket. At times, my childhood was really interesting. Typically, when you're 8 years old, and you've had a long day of school and it's 3:30, all you can think about is going home, having a snack, watching cartoons, and eventually getting to your homework. So this was my plan. I remember one day I was 8 years old and I thought, okay, I'm gonna go home, watch TV, have a snack. And just as I approached the door, I opened the door and I saw 13 Molanas sitting in my living room. And I didn't know what to think. I was so scared, I just ran to my room and I thought, great. No cartoons today. And I remember the next day thinking, okay, today will be different. I'm going to go home. It's going to be a normal day. Cartoons, snack, eventually do my homework. And as I was approaching my house, I saw 3 limousines parked outside. I saw security personnel walking around our property, and a bunch of our neighbors were outside wondering what was happening inside our house. And I was so scared, I did not even know if I could go inside my house. So my mom came out, she got me and explained to me that, there's a diplomat who's come to meet with your father. At that time, I remember thinking, who is my dad? And what does he do? It wasn't until much later that I learned that this was all part of my dad's efforts to start the national charitable organization to bring Shia communities together. And these were all consultations, part of that process. Another thing that was really fun in my house was whenever you think of something you want to do to help other people, my parents were always really encouraging. I remember when it was 2004, when the earthquake and tsunami happened off the west coast of Indonesia. More than 280,000 people died. And around the world, people were raising money for relief efforts. So we were just twiddling our thumbs thinking, what can we do to help? And it just so happened that this was around the time of Eid al-Adha. And one of the organizations that my dad was working with was the Ahlulbayt Assembly of Canada. And every year they would organize a really big Eid namaz. And all the Shia communities would come together, they would pray together. It was so well attended, and you would feel so great to see everyone. So then we thought, why not try and maybe sell roses so that people can take the roses, give it to their family members, and all the proceeds can go to the relief efforts. And I suggested this to my dad, and he said, okay, let's do it. So we bought a whole bunch of roses, a couple hundred roses, and went to Eid namaz. And I remember standing at the entrance with my mom and a few other volunteers. And as everyone started leaving, they were coming and buying roses, and it was so encouraging. And then it just so happened that the hall cleared out, and we looked behind, and there were so many more roses left. We're like, oh no, what do we do? So we took all the roses home. Now, mind you, this was winter. It was snowing, it was below degrees, it was really, really cold. So I decided to walk around door to door in our neighborhood and try and sell roses. After about 40 minutes, I only sold 1 rose. I went back in the house, had a cup of hot chocolate, and my dad felt really sorry for me. He said, you know what, let me do something. So he took all the roses, put them in the car, and drove up north to the complex. He went himself door to door, again in winter, and every time someone would open the door, they were shocked to see him. They're like, Ghulam, you're selling roses? And every single person, without fail, would offer him chai or a samosa. And, of course they would, support him, and they bought a rose. But they were so surprised to see him do this. And he wanted to show that no task is too big or too small for any of us. Nothing is beneath us. They were so used to seeing him in a leadership capacity, and they thought, he shouldn't be selling roses. But he kept going. He went for almost an hour and managed to sell all of the roses. And my mom is a remarkable woman. She took on a leadership role with our community in the 90s as a chairlady, and she was also no stranger to rolling up her sleeves and working really hard. I remember back in the 90s, when people would pass away, we would provide what is called kari mani, or siaka, which is food for the families who are grieving as a way of offering some support. And in those days, I remember my mom would go into the garage, take out the buggy, and we would walk down the street together to Longo's, and she would purchase groceries at her own expense. And then we would keep walking down with a buggy full of groceries towards the mosque, and then she would prepare a meal for the families and then make sure that they were all fed. And if they were planning to stay overnight at the mosque, make sure they had blankets and pillows, and if they didn't have any, we would bring stuff from home. So it was this level of care and compassion that made me realize that serving the community isn't necessarily just a task or a chore. It's a labor of love. And when you're taking care of other people, showing them support, it's really rewarding, and it makes you want to do even more, to help more people. The only thing that really separates me from other people is that I have a really unique set of parents. And through them, they've paved the way for me. They've lent credibility to me through all their hard work. And I'm so blessed that Allah gave me them as parents. People often tell me how impressed they are by me, that I've done so much. But what really surprises me, because I don't feel like I've done much. And in fact, I feel like I have so much work to do. And really, it's not about me doing these things. My life here is just a fleeting moment. It's really about making sure that people who don't have a voice have a voice. And if we can be that voice for them, great. If we can empower them to have their own voice, even better. I feel like my purpose is making sure that Canadian Muslims have a positive voice in the media, in the public sphere, inside and outside our community, and making sure that we are represented in an accurate, fair, and professional manner. And I strongly believe that every day, if we renew our intention, Allah will bless us with opportunities to serve, and with a good intention, He will give success to everything that we put our hearts and minds to. When I was young, I started thinking about how privileged I am, how there are people in the world who don't have access to electricity, who don't have a roof over their heads, people who don't have access to clean water, regular supply of food, people who, just like me, who live in refugee camps or really, really precarious political circumstances, don't have access to education. And then I started to think, wow, look at where I live. Allah has placed me in a place where I have opportunities, where I have safety, where I have so many blessings. There has to be a reason why I am where I am, and I have the opportunities that I have. And I can't take advantage of those opportunities and all these blessings. I have to do everything I can in my capacity to help those people who don't have the opportunities I have. And for all of us who try to do what we can to help other people, it's really easy for us to feel tired or discouraged or lose our motivation. And we have to always remember that when times get tough, there are other people who have it worse than us. And as long as we are dedicated, we put our hearts out there and our minds in the right place, Allah will help us. And the more we can do with other people, collaborate, the more we can make a difference. Well, my first leadership role was when I was 13. The Jaffrey Islamic Youth had a team called the YPT, which was the Youth Presentation Team. And their purpose was to organize presentations and events related to issues that youth were interested in. You had to be a minimum of 16 years old to join that team. And I was so eager to get involved that I begged them to let me join. So they let me join on a probationary basis. And within a couple of months, I ended up leading a team of university students in organizing events, and I was 13. I guess for me, I was looking for a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and I found that in our community. And I also wanted to make a difference. So at that age, I just wanted to do what I could in my capacity to work with my peers and try to make a difference. And it was also I grew up in that environment where my parents were always, they were doers. They were organizing events or initiatives or getting involved in some capacity. So I guess through osmosis, it made sense to me, and I kind of, their passion was contagious. The first time I ever joined a nonprofit board was when I was 22, and it was for the Organization for Islamic Learning. I found it really difficult wrapping my head around governance, accountability, transparency, and learning how to be in compliance with CRA. And also sitting at a table with all men who were over the age of 60 when I was only 22. But it was really important for my dad that I learned these skills. And it's really humbling to be able to sit at the table and make these types of decisions and learn these skills. And I encourage other young women to get involved in nonprofit boards. There aren't too many of us who get involved in this capacity, and it's a good learning opportunity, and it's a good opportunity to make decisions that impact more people. A few years ago, I was working for the Humber River Hospital Foundation, which was dedicated towards raising money to build a new hospital. And at that time, I remember there were a lot of discussions and strategies to raise money from all various communities except the Muslim community. And that was interesting because the catchment area that the hospital served had a lot of Muslims living in the area, yet they were not part of that conversation. And this really bothered me because giving to charity is something that is ingrained in our faith. So I took it upon myself to build a committee called the Muslim Friends of Humber, which was committed to raising $250,000 over 5 years towards the hospital. And what I did was I reached out to a number of mosques in the area, as well as beyond the area, that were from the Shia and Sunni communities. And it took me a year to build this committee because these were mosques that had never worked together. So building that trust, building that friendship took a long time. And we used to meet on a monthly basis and strategize how we were going to raise money. And in that process, we would, ask each other how we were doing at our respective centers and what are the upcoming programs, and invite each other to our programs. And it just so happened that we ended up raising the money. It just so happened that we fulfilled our commitment early, within 3 years, and we still continue to stay friends and we stay in contact. And in fact, now one of the things we're trying to do is start a new project as a team. And I think it's really important that we continue these intra-faith dialogues and these friendships, because the only way other Muslims will learn about Shias is through getting to know us better, working with us, coming to our centers, and for us to make an effort and go to their centers as well. This was something that I learned from my father, and probably why I had a lot of ease in establishing this committee, because these committees trusted me because they knew my dad, because he had spent many, many years establishing those relationships as well. Well, when people look at me, they either see me as a woman of faith, or someone who's oppressed, or even a terrorist. And I can't blame them. That's just the way the media portrays people who look like me. And one study showed that 80% of media coverage negatively portrays Muslims and Islam. So really, it's up to us to dispel these negative misrepresentations. I remember I was 9 years old, and on my birthday, I decided to wear hijab. I went to school, and most of the kids in my class teased me, accused me of being bald. This was really hard. It was hard to focus in school. It was hard to understand how to deal with this. And I remember that a Sadiq school was being formed at that time. And I begged my dad to please send me to a Sadiq. I figured it would be a safer space for me. And I went to a Sadiq starting in grade 5, and I was part of the first graduating class in grade 8. We were 8 students in grade 8. And I remember that's what gave me the foundation to go back into a public high school. I was ready, mentally, emotionally, to take on any criticisms, any questions, from my peers, from teachers, from the school staff. And then that fateful day happened, 9/11. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing. I was sitting in grade 9 family studies class, and the teacher brought in a TV, turned it on, and all we saw was burning buildings, people dying, and I was outraged. I was thinking, who would do such a thing? Then all of a sudden the headlines read, breaking news, jihad, Muslim terrorist. All of a sudden, the kids' heads turned and they all looked at me. Some of them asked, why did your people do this? So in that moment, I was turned from a citizen into a suspect. And I was now responsible to answer these hard questions. Days after, I remember walking to school. I was walking up North on Bayview, and someone slowed down their car, rolled down their window, and yelled at me, "Hey, you terrorists, go back to your country." And I thought to myself, I'm born in Canada, and I'm only 14. Like, do I really deserve to be yelled at like this and accused like this of something I didn't even do? And in those days, I remember a lot of Muslim women, younger and older, were talking about whether it was safer for them to remove their hijab. And I was thinking, wait a minute, we can't give in to this fear. That's counterproductive. We have work to do. This is what motivated me throughout high school, throughout university, to get involved in social justice causes for anyone who is oppressed or marginalized, whether it's locally in Canada or in any other country in the world. It made me realize that we really need to be vocal. And if we're not vocal, then we're part of the problem. And later, during Harper's administration, we saw how much our community, all Muslims across the country, suffered. And finally, I remember, and it wasn't until a month after my father passed away, in October, I got a phone call from someone I consider my brother, who said, "Hey, a bunch of us want to do something about getting Muslims to vote. Can we count on you to get involved?" And I had a choice. Either I stay home and I sulk and I grieve the loss of my father, or I do something that was important to him, which was getting people out there and voting and having meaningful participation from our community. So I said, okay, I'm in. So we spent pretty much an entire year of 2015 mobilizing people across the country, mobilizing Muslims to vote and understand why it was important for them to have their voice heard. One of the biggest challenges we had was, people thinking that, what's my vote going to do? It's only one vote. It's not going to make a difference. But it really did make a difference. What's so unique about my dad is he actually wrote his own eulogy for his funeral. He started writing this 4 years before he passed away, and he updated it 2 weeks before he passed away. And I find it really hard to read, but I'll make myself do it just so that I can remember what I'm supposed to do. And I would like to share a passage with you, because when you hear what he has to say, he has advice for the community, and you can tell how much he loved his community, how much he cares about all of us. "Before my funeral, cry and lament as much as you want, but please ensure that this does not affect anybody's health. But once the funeral is over, celebrate. Celebrate that I had a funeral, whereas there are... Celebrate. Celebrate that I had a funeral, whereas there were and there will be many who will not get this. Remember my nephew Mahmoud Datadina, whose body could not be found. Remember the martyrs of Karbala, whose bodies lay unburied for 3 days. Celebrate that I am going to meet my master and meet the Ahlulbayt if I am worthy of it. Pray that this happens and celebrate. To the community, I request that please be united. My community consists of several levels. My immediate family, ensure that there is a leader from the family and follow him or her. My extended family, do not fight over petty issues. Again, have a leader of the clan. My clan includes the ones where our children have married into other families. My extended family, do not fight over petty issues. Again, have a leader of the clan. My clan includes the ones where our children have married into other families and various Sajans and their offsprings. My immediate community, be role models to other Shia communities. Have discussions and disagreements, but at the end of the day, be united. The decisions of the majority should be accepted, and even if these may appear to be wrong. My Shia community, work together. Aim to eliminate culture-based institutions and work towards having one single Canadian Shia unit. My Muslim community, work towards unity of purpose. We can have madhabi differences, but the bottom line should be, we are one Muslim, one Ummah. To all, remember the rights of non-Muslims on us and the rights of our neighbors. As Imam Ali alayhi salam has said, a Muslim is your fellow brother, whereas a non-Muslim is your fellow traveler. Look after the fellow traveler. So I remember when my dad was writing his last speech, and I tried not to think about it because losing your parent is one of the hardest and biggest things you can ever go through. And it was always my biggest fear. I always used to think, what will happen if I lose my mom or my dad? How will I react? How will I behave? How will I be able to handle it? And one of the most thoughtful things my dad ever did was prepare us. He made sure we were so prepared. He sat down with us, explained exactly everything we needed to do, who to call, what to do. And this speech was really helpful because till today, I always seek his guidance. And I always want to know, how would we want me to conduct myself? What more would he want me to do? And I think, let me read his speech again. Let me see if it makes me think of something else. So it's a real blessing to have this. And I remember sitting across from my dad in the weeks before he passed away, and we would just look at each other. Me and him had a really special relationship. We could understand each other without even having to use words. And I knew what he was thinking when he was looking at me, and what I was thinking when I was looking at him. We were sad that one day we weren't going to see each other anymore. And that made us really sad. But at the same time, we had a lot of faith that what was going to happen was the right thing, that it's ultimately Allah's decision, and have to have faith in Allah. And it's not easy. It's never easy to lose a parent. And I feel so blessed that I have my family, I have the community and the external community for support. And I pray that anyone who goes through this has support. And Allah is the biggest support. As long as we keep that faith and we remember that we are all in this journey. One day we all have to go. And that's why it's so important for us to do as much as we can while we're here. Because our life is so short. And my dad loved life. He used to tell us, I love life. He was sad to go, but it was his time. I have really big shoes to fill. And I love you. I miss you. And I hope I'm making you proud. And I hope I'm keeping your legacy alive.